Hey everybody, Braden here, and welcome back to another tournament game video. Today we are going to be looking at a game I played against Merlin, and I am playing with the black pieces in round 3 of the Ontario Open. Alright, let's get into it. So we see e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, cd4, knight d4, knight f6, knight c3, and then knight c6, the classical Sicilian. So my opponent played a move that I hadn't seen yet. And to be clear, when I say I haven't seen yet, I think I did look at the files here like before the tournament, but in general I haven't really seen this move even online, just because I'm new, or I was at the time, new to the opening. So seeing this f3, I know this is kind of a move in the Najdorf as well. People have played f3, or even back here, people might sometimes play f3 with the purpose of they want to get a Maroczy bind after c4. But yeah, so this f3 was kind of new to me here, and I wasn't exactly sure what my preparation had shown, and I was a little concerned. So I just tried to calculate on my own, and the first thing I calculated was e5, because this feels like the most natural move. But I wasn't sure if this was working. After knight b3, bishop b6, I wasn't really scared of bishop e3 here, because I knew I had d5, and this is actually one of the main lines. Takes, knight takes, queen takes, bishop takes, castles, and then this bishop to a5, b5 move. This is all actually theory, but I wasn't sure exactly how to make out this, this move knight d5. Because after knight d5, this could feel uncomfortable just because I do have the backward d-pawn. Turns out black is actually totally fine here. Just played bishop b7. Most common move is bishop to e3 in master games. And there's two options here. You can either take on d5, which goes into crazy complications, or you can just castle. This line looked really interesting though, this knight b4. Because it actually goats you into playing this bishop to b5 check, but it's not really actually that good of a move. Because what you want to play here is c4 to protect the d5 pawn, and if you play bishop b5 check, you can no longer play c4 as a6. Will create some problems here for white. But okay, going back, I didn't end up going for e5. I go for e6, which is kind of like a Scheveningen, I guess. And now we just kind of go into a potential English attack with bishop e3, which is very annoying, because after bishop e3, which is one of those English attack moves, so is this f3 move, and we're getting into an English attack where I played e6, and from what I know, sometimes it's good to have this e5 move in. So I wasn't really super duper happy here. I was kind of like out of my comfort. So I just focused on developing bishop e7, queen d2, a6, bishop e2. Turns out this is actually just all theory. This is all fine. And then bishop d7. I also like the idea of knight takes and then queen takes, followed by either like bishop d7 or castling. That also looked tempting to me. But also bishop e2, if we go back to it, it's not really the most accurate move. I think g4 is a bit more challenging here, because this bishop wants to stay on f1. Why? Let's find out. So let's say castles, and then we go queen c7, just trying to find a move. There's this move g5 that can be played, where normally we'd want to play knight e8, but the problem is it kind of cuts off our rook. So there's actually this move knight h5 that would be played, and this is why the bishop kind of wants to be on f1 instead. Funnily enough, even though it looks like after bishop e2 there's like f4, but it's more of a flexibility purpose, where there's this alternative plan of bishop h3, g6, bishop g4. You don't really want to move your knight back, because then they play like h4, h5, and open the diagonal anyways. But here, the problem for black is we're pretty slow if we try for like some b5, b4 attacks. Normally there's enough counterplay where it's fine, but this is one scenario where it's not the case. And that's kind of just my guess as to why bishop e2 is just not the most accurate. But bishop to d7. And now a4 was played. And again, this g4 is kind of the star move instead. a4 doesn't really make sense because in these positions, normally you want to play g4, g5. And here still f4 is good. And you want to castle long, but after a4, you're not really going to be getting g4 in, and you're not really wanting to castle long either. So a4 was played, and I ended up playing rook c8. Another move I really should have considered here that is kind of a weakness of mine is I don't like creating weaknesses, even if it's a dynamic equality. And what I mean by that is the best move is d5, or it's at least one of the best options here, where after e takes, knight takes, and pawn takes, we do get an isolated pawn position. I didn't even consider this because I saw isolated pawn and I just kind of like stopped there. And this is kind of a lesson to not stop there, because what we'll notice here is, again, white's not going to castle long when we have an isolated pawn. Isolated pawn positions are very famous for the isolated pawn player trying to attack and be aggressive. They usually have more activity with these two open files. So opposite side castling doesn't really make sense. Plus a4 is played, so that's just a huge weakness. And if you have to castle short in a position like this and play positionally against this d-pawn, there's kind of some problems here. Namely this file. Since f3 was played, this move's completely out of place. If the pawn were on f2, I'm pretty confident that white would just have a clear advantage here. They could play moves like bishop to f3, or they can just play moves like rook a d1, or like b3, or even c3. Kind of just like normal moves, just spitballing there. And you don't really have to worry, but because this file's open after a move like rook a d1, which feels natural, this rook e8 causes so many problems. This bishop on e3 is kind of indirectly hit. And you really got to be careful about some sort of even exchange sacrifice. Let's just say, oh, trying to get rid of the arrows. Let's just not get rid of the arrows then. Let's just say a really bad move like b3 and then bishop f6. And you can just imagine some like rook takes e3 being full compensation in these types of positions because of this diagonal. And with the isolated pawn, we're looking for activity, and that's a very active type of plan there. Obviously, you have to do some stuff to allow this. This isn't really much more than equality here, but it's definitely not that bad for black because of this f3 pawn being pushed. So yeah, going back here, I played rook c8 instead, not going for d5. And again, d5 is the critical break, so it's kind of sad that I didn't go for it. But after rook c8, f4 was played. And I wasn't really happy with castling here. I wasn't exactly sure how to evaluate the positions. Generally, I feel kind of uncomfortable with short castles when I know that these f5 or e5 moves could come. Obviously, they're going to castle short, and they're still going to be able to attack my king. So if I castle, they castle. I have to go for queenside play, whereas they're going for mate. And usually, you know, if you're going for queenside play and you're doing something a little bit more abstract where it's like material gain that you're trying to go for, then sometimes it's hard not to kind of flinch in these types of positions. Like King's Indian, right? People say, you know, King's Indian is better for white, or all this stuff. But even though I don't even think that's true in correspondence play, I'm pretty sure like black is doing fine. But something to mention here is that when you play against the King's Indian, sure, you might think like, yay, I'm happy, I know the computer thinks I'm better. And sometimes people actually just have good results against it. But at the same time, when they're trying to checkmate you and there's a bunch of pieces near your king, you kind of think differently, right? It's like that Tyson quote. It was like you have a strategy until you get hit, something like that. But anyways, so getting back to it, I wasn't really too happy to see potential moves here. So I ended up playing h5, which I think is actually totally fine. This is a really interesting move actually, and it's a very clear purpose. If they castle, I'm playing knight g4, and they castle, and then I play knight g4. So the whole point is, if they take, then I can take with the pawn. I open up the h file for my rook, and then I'll just keep my king in the center. This is kind of a common idea, especially in the classical Sicilian of all Sicilians, where you just keep your king in the center, and you don't really see this as much when white castle's short as well. Usually it's the other way around, but we can see how the attack could build up here pretty easily. So I was pretty happy to go into a position like this. Obviously they didn't take. They played knight takes c6. I ended up playing bishop takes c6 here, and then they played bishop d4, which was really interesting because now, like, I don't want to play e5, but now I'm kind of forced to. If I don't play e5, g7's hanging. I don't want to castle because then moves like h3 or bishop takes g4 make a lot more sense now. But e5 does appear to actually just get that dark square bishop. And this is a big deal because when they play f3 or f4, this diagonal becomes weaker if I can take that bishop. So e5. And they played bishop e3, which is definitely worse than another option. Like, I thought this was forced bishop e3. Or, like, I thought at least they would maybe consider taking. And then playing bishop e3. But I don't really think this is that great after taking. I think we should be pretty happy about this. We might even be able to play some sort of g6. I'm not sure. But yeah, they end up just playing bishop e3 immediately, which I was pretty happy about. I just took, and I think I'm totally fine there. But there's this really funny option of bishop a7, and I was looking at some moves here, so I'm not like sure exactly how I was supposed to play originally. I didn't really see this in the game. Obviously, this is an obvious looking move. Obvious. Just like it's the only square where it can't be taken. h3 is going to be played next, and then you can move your bishop. But I wasn't sure exactly how to follow up here as white, at least, or no, sorry, as black. And I came up with this idea, which is actually slightly worse for black, but kind of okay. So rook a8, bishop takes g4, h takes rook takes a7. H takes g4 would be bad because if h takes g4, then bishop e3. And this all worked out. I developed my rook, and then they took and created a weakness. This actually makes total sense now. But if rook takes e7 or a7, bishop e2 gets played, and then this rook is just misplaced. I played rook c8, rook a8, rook a7, and now I have to probably... I can't really push my b pawn because a6 will be weak, so I have to play like rook back to a8 and then rook to c8 again to activate it. So this is kind of like a funny computer line that I saw that gave white a very slight advantage, but that's so hard to see. At least for like realizing that this works. It should be about equal here, I believe. Rook a8 isn't the best move, but it was the most interesting to me as a human because I'm not a computer, because I want that dark squared bishop. But all right. Yeah, I think f takes e5, something along those lines is best, or even castles, but I'm not going to get into that. I'm more interested in what happened in the game. So bishop to e3 was played. I snapped it off immediately because that's a very important piece. It's important to also note that I think here bishop takes g4 is tempting, but I don't think it works after takes, and then takes on c3 here. And let's just say queen takes. We could probably give up that pawn. Maybe bishop f6. I'd just be worried about some e5. I haven't calculated this part. Let's just say this is the move. Queen takes g7 and even rook f8. And we have 2 bishops for a rook. I don't even think this is the best continuation. Maybe it actually is totally fine. But getting 2 bishops for rook, we're pretty happy about that. And actually, yeah, this does look fine. We can play like queen g4 and then rook g8 next. So they have to play like f5 here. But then we can maybe even just take. No. The whole point is like rook e1, then we can play this. Anyways, not important at all. I just wanted to show some stuff here. But okay, bishop to e3 takes, and then I played h4. Pretty much every move it was possible. E takes f4 is just the better option. It's because mainly we're trying to open things up, because since we have the bishop pair, this could be dynamically good for us, giving the bishop's places to go. After e takes, queen takes, there's this move like bishop f6, for example, trying to open up the piece and give it a diagonal. And even though we have a weak pawn, we have the bishop pair. So even if we lost it, there's arguably full compensation for the pawn. But I played h4 instead. h3 now. And I played rook h6, which is technically fine. Castles is more interesting. I wasn't sure exactly how to evaluate this position, because I was kind of worried maybe f5 would be good. It's just not, though. Again, even though we have a weakness of the d6 pawn, we have the bishop pair, and that's much more important here. Let's move bishop g5 and after queen d3. We do have I would say a practical advantage. I'm unsure if this is a full objective advantage here. But even if we just give up this pawn, it's very common for these types of positions where you just give up the d6 pawn and either e4 becomes weak somehow, or you just get like a lot of c-file pressure, or even like just put like your pieces on the d-file and just argue like, okay, I lost the pawn, but like this is your extra pawn, and I will forever be able to eventually target it. So a very common Sicilian idea here to kind of like get counterplay and give up a pawn. But yeah, rook h6, king h1 was played, which is a good move here. And I played rook g6, which I thought was funny, but was not really correct, unfortunately. They played bishop g4, and now I'm totally fine. But here, yeah, there's a lot of complications after d takes, and I think it's like rook a d1 or queen f3. Let's just say this move, queen c7, and then like queen f3, where unfortunately we're gonna have to put something on f6, and we're not really happy to use either piece. There's this queen h5 move if we bring the rook over, and what we'd want to play pretty much at all times is like bishop d7 to start like getting over to e6 or something and start covering squares. But we're not really given that ability so easily. After rook f6, queen h5, the problem is bishop d7 kind of just loses immediately to knight d5 now. And there's another variation I put in here, f takes, immediate queen f3, bishop f6, rook a d1, and then queen e7. And this is better for white. And originally, it was like, okay, what's white's threat? And I looked a little into the position. I looked as deep as I could. And there's no immediate threat. But that doesn't matter. Black's pieces kind of suck. Black's king is stuck in the center, and like this piece can't move easily because sometimes bishop c4 will come. This rook, where's its next move? I guess rook g3 is possible, and that's kind of like its only benefit. d5, the d5 square is weak. And there's a lot of problems for black to solve. There's also this funny idea. I think queen c7. It probably works here. there's moves like b4. And b4 is extremely difficult to deal with because b5's coming, and how do you respond to that? If b5 and then we move away, now there's this knight d5 move. And again, all of these options are kind of just always there for white, and it's unclear where black's pros are. Everything looks a little active for black, but nothing's coordinated well. So they played bishop g4 instead. I immediately blunder in return with bishop d7, because now they should play, I think it's like either bishop h5 or f5. They go bishop h5, which I think actually f5 is supposed to be the move. Yeah, f5 is supposed to be the move here. Rook g3, rook f3, rook takes, and I was pretty happy here because now I get this move g6 in. Bishop g4 takes and takes. And yeah, I was extremely happy here, and I played queen d7, saying, okay, I'll go into a worse ending where I don't have the d5 square. This is bad. f5 is playable now. This is actually a huge problem. Instead, I should just go king f8, or no, sorry, I should take on f4, queen f4. There's bishop g5 here. There's also like king f8 to g7. I think bishop g5 makes a little bit more sense, just because after king f8, the whole idea here is if they bring their rook in, then you can defend with like the queen somehow. And I looked at this move rook d1 just to see why everything was supposedly equal according to Stockfish, and queen e8, and that kind of was a revelation to me that wait, we have full compensation for the pawn. Because even if we lose this pawn's not really the healthiest pawn. They have dark square weaknesses around their king, and our king is totally safe, and our pieces are actually quite active. So rook takes d6 and just like king g7, and there's full compensation, which was really surprising to me at first. But then when I looked at it a bit more, it started to make sense. So this is a position to be pretty happy about. So queen d7, they played queen f3, e takes f4, queen takes f4. I finally take on f4 and go queen e6, because now there's possibilities of bishop f6. But they play rook d1, and now bishop f6 would just not be good because rook takes d6. So I play rook c5, and the idea is to kind of just transfer the rook over to a more active square. If I have an isolated pawn, might as well put it on a square where it's going to be really active. Rook f1, bishop d8, queen f2, rook to e5, and then queen to d4 was played. So I'm actually fine here. I can play king f8, for example, I believe. And if queen b4, trying to go for this b7 pawn, I actually don't care. Just bishop a5, take on c3, and then go this really important move, queen c4. And you can't take on e4, and you can't really do anything like take on c3 because you always have to worry about f7. But we can kind of see exactly where the compensation is. Yeah, because like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pawns. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're down a pawn, but they have these doubled c pawns. A pawn's weak, e4 pawn's weak. We have some weaknesses in return. Namely the d6 pawn. a6 is a little less weak, but I think it's fair to say it's a little weak. But yeah, again, we're totally fine here, and we're not really worried about a move like rook f4 because of a move we'll see later on in the game. So I don't want to spoil that. So I played b5 instead, thinking it's a good idea. Ooh, clever me. I'm covering b7 with my rook. So now I have no weaknesses, but now I have a different type of weakness. And it's the weakness of two flanks. I'm weak in the center. On the queen side, not really as much on the king side, but I'm pretty weak in the center and now on the queen side. They can play rook a1, and I'm pretty sure this just wins a pawn. Because the only move I could see that's a realistic defense to find is this rook c5 move. This feels the most natural. But this, again, loses a pawn to queen h8. King d7, rook a7, rook c7. And you don't actually take on b5 here, you take on h4. And b5 is still weak. And also now we're like covering the e4 pawn, so now we are threatening knight b5, and we also have knight d5. So white has a pretty big advantage here. So this would not be good. Yeah, and then white makes a mistake in return with b4. I end up playing g5 here, queen to d3, and I make a mistake with queen d7 going for passive defense. Instead, I really should have just gone queen c4. I think in the game after queen d7, I was wondering what about rook f5. But I was pretty sure I was happy about the move. If I'm not mistaken, let me see. Let me see here. Was it f6 or queen c6? Maybe it was neither. Let me put the engine on. I'm actually really curious. After rook f5, rook takes f5. E takes f5. And yeah, bishop f6. Okay. Yeah, I think this was what I was looking at. Right. Where like if they go for the pawn, then we do have some activity after bishop e5. I'm not going to give myself credit. I'm just going to pretend I didn't see that in the game. I probably shouldn't give myself that credit for how bad I've been playing. But okay, my opponent played knight d5 instead. I then played queen c6, which is a mistake. They like rook f5 was actually more like a better chance than the knight d5, I believe. But queen c6 is a bit of a problem because of queen f3, queen d7, and now this annoying move queen h5 looks interesting, but there's much better here. There's rook a1 again, and there's problems with queen h5 to h8. There's also problems with like rook a7 or rook a8. And again, they kind of kill me from both sides because now I definitely am weak on the king side and in the center and on the queen side. This is actually just lost. But after queen e6, I was a little happier kind of getting into the, like getting my pieces a little bit more scrunched up. And then queen f8 was played, which I was happy to see, but for the wrong reason. Actually, rook a1 again. Huge problem. Rook a7 check stuff comes, and again they kill me from both sides. But queen f8 turns out I can just take on e4. Originally this looked really scary at first, but it turns out white only has one move in this position to draw the game, and it's rook e7. That's not an easy move to see. So likely if we got into a position like this, I might have actually just won the game. Where after rook e7, the problem is after bishop takes e7, they have to go for a perpetual now. They have to. King e8 is bad because of knight c7 check, so we have to play king d8. Queen b6 check is important. If queen b8, then we can bring our queen back. King d7, and yeah, it ends in a perpetual with queen b6, queen b7. I ended up playing a different move, which I thought worked, and it turns out, yeah, it kind of worked for what they did. I played f5, and I don't think you should take the pawn. That's what I was hoping for. The whole point is, they can't take with the pawn. They wish they could, but then I take their knight. If they take with the rook, then I take with the rook, and we enter an endgame that I had calculated a little bit, and I didn't really see much wrong with it. They're actually winning here, but again because of rook a1, which we both kept missing. So they ended up taking on f5, which I was pretty happy about. So they go up a pawn here in an ending of minor piece versus minor piece, but I wasn't so worried here because after king c6, knight c3, and d5, I am threatening d4, which is a big problem, so they have to play knight e2. Then I play bishop f6, c3, king d6, king g1, king e5. And I even give up the b pawn, but it doesn't matter here. After knight takes b5, king takes f5. If they ever played like some sort of knight d4 and then push their b pawn, I can always stop it with bishop e5. What ended up happening in the game instead was king f2. But I was pretty happy to see that, because now it's just an immediate draw by repetition. As we'll see, king e4. I'm threatening king d3. That's a huge problem. They have to stop it. Because if they play something like knight d4 now, I can actually just take and then win this pawn. And maybe I don't even have to look at that. Maybe I can consider a move like king d3 as well, but king d3, knight e2, so maybe not even then. But alright, king e2 is played. Bishop to e5. So the point of this move is actually to defend against knight d4 and knight d6. Any way for the knight to get back. As knight d4 here, we can take b5 here, and this is winning, no matter kind of where they go, just because we'll be able to protect our pawn in time, clearly. So this is winning for black. So obviously they're not going to do that. They play king d2, and then I play king f4. So this is kind of the idea here, and why I wasn't as worried. Is what I had calculated, at least not way before when we started the minor piece ending, but I started calculating this around here. I thought I had full compensation. I actually missed knight e2, which is not really great, but everything was actually fine anyways after bishop to f6, because obviously like the best thing to happen would be this scenario, where they have to go somewhere, but it's not clear where they should go. Maybe knight a2. If knight e2, then king d5, bishop to f6, and then king c4, for example, and we're getting full activity, like a lot of activity, and this is at least full compensation. But going back to the game, yeah, after bishop to e5, king d2, now I play king f4, and this is what the draw is they have to play king e2 as a response, because right now I'm threatening king g3, picking up these pawns. And maybe they can hold by doing something else. In the game, I wasn't so sure, and I was pretty happy to go into this. So they play king e2, and then I play king e4. And again, they can't really make a useful move. If they move their king back, I play king d3. And if they move their knight, then I can take on c3 or take on d4. So after this, they're kind of forced to play king d2, where I play king f4, and we agreed to a draw in this position. So this was a really interesting one, and it all kind of started with my fault of going for this this e6 structure, actually. You just have a much more critical line after e5, knight b3 and bishop e6. There's kind of like a very forcing nature, which both white and black are kind of forced into, either this knight d5 move or this bishop e3 allowing d5, which I think is totally fine for black. Even I would prefer black in that position, but if knight d5, I think that's a little bit more challenging here. And yeah, there's a lot to learn from this game, so I'm pretty happy that it was played the way it was. I thought I ended up defending quite reasonably, even though it clearly wasn't that good. There were so many times where I was just losing the game entirely, but sometimes that happens, where you and your opponent have like a mutual blindness here, because again, when you're trying to go for the king side or center, you don't really think of rook a1, right? In these types of positions, but maybe you do. It's totally logical now, but definitely an easy miss, since I did miss it, and so did my opponent. But that's going to conclude it for this game. It was a draw, so now I have a loss, a win, and a draw in this event. So that is equal score after round 3. And I will see you guys in round number 4. Have a good one. Bye-bye.